Hello and welcome to this video about the construction of a gaming PC. I'm Seby and I will be explaining the various components that I'll be using to build this PC. Then I will demonstrate how to install these components, so this could help you build your own. This video won't cover all technical specifications of the components that are presented. Every gaming computer will require a decent gaming motherboard. For my project, I've chosen the Gigabyte AB350 Gaming 3 motherboard. This ATX motherboard is second generation, which supports the new generations of AMD Ryzen processors with the AM4 CPU socket. It comprises the RGB fusion feature that allows you to use the most advanced LED system that is available in the market. It offers super fast onboard storage with NVMe PCI Express and the latest USB 3.1 Gen 2 with a transfer speed of 10 gigabytes per second. Building a gaming PC will demand an incredible multi-core, high-performance processor. The AMD Ryzen 7 1700X is a very intelligent piece of technology that contains 8 processing cores, 16 threads with an extended frequency range and better cooling. This new Zen core architecture guarantees a major improvement of performance over the previous generations. This processor comes with a base clock of 3.4 GHz and can be overclocked to 3.8 GHz. With this high of a speed, heat is always an issue that should be seriously addressed. At this point, I didn't consider a water-based cooling technology due to the size of the radiator, and given the possibility that I might overclock this computer, so I wanted a silent dual-speed cooler. The Mergen 5 CPU cooler also simplifies its construction by offering a pre-assembled mounting bar and spring-loaded screws, which made the installation much easier. Now onto the video card. There are a couple of aspects that I wanted my video card to handle. Latest high-definition games, superior picture and sound quality to be VR ready, and it's 3 times more speed than previous generations due to its new most advanced GPU architecture that is available in the market. So I picked up the one model below the top one, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060. Making sure that I have enough power supply to this PC and future upgrades, I have chosen to go with a slightly bigger power supply than normal, from Cooler Master, providing me with a total power of 550 watts. This power supply is highly efficient, 89%, according to the specs and multiple built-in protection systems, next to a very quiet built-in fan. In terms of hard drive, it is known that SSD drives are much faster than typical hard drives, which will be a critical requirement for this PC. Instead of going with a standalone SSD, I chose a Samsung 500GB M2 SATA drive that connects straight into the motherboard, providing me with even more speed and performance. Being the memory is required to handle a big amount of data, therefore I chose a minimum of 32 GB of RAM, so I can cache out quickly the data required for higher definition games. For the case, I chose the Fractal Design Define S for several reasons. The size for future expansion and multiple storage drives, the sturdiness of the construction of the case, and the advanced cable management. As you can see, the processor is already seated on the motherboard with the special gel applied on the top. This is the mounting board for the CPU cooler. The base will be seated under the motherboard through these 4 holes. We will use these washers to set off the cooler chassis so it sits properly on top of the processor. We will place the washers as you can see. And now it's time to mount these 2 brackets. Let's install the first bracket in place, and we will repeat this action for the second mounting plate. Before we mount the cooler on top of the processor, let's make sure the gel is distributed evenly. This will be the bridge that will go on top of the processor to support the cooler. And this will be the cooler that mounts onto the bridge. Before mounting the cooler, let's also assure that the gel is distributed properly on the base of the cooler. It is time now to set the cooler on top of the processor. With the cooler sitting on top of the processor, let's mount the bridge by tightening the tension screws from both sides. In order to screw down the bridge on the other side, we will go through the shaft to reach the screw. Tighten the screws down till the end of the tension. With this, we ensure that both ends are tightened and pressing down equally. This will be the last screw that goes through the shaft to tighten the entire mechanism. The cooler comes with two side-mounted fans. Let's take one of the fans and mount them to this side of the cooler. Then, we will mount this tension clip to the side of the fan and lock it to the radiator side of the cooler. We will repeat the same procedure to all sides of the fans. Next is to plug in the fans to the motherboard, one for one side and one for the other. As you can see, the M2 SATA drive is already seated and secured onto the motherboard. We will then install these two Vengeance DDR4 memory cards onto the motherboard. This shows how the memory cards are seated and secured by the side clips. Now is the time to prep the mounting holes inside the case for the motherboard. These screws will allow us to screw down the motherboard to the case with a slight set-off distance. Before mounting the motherboard onto the case, there is a connector plate that first needs to be mounted. This is how it looks from inside the case, and now this is how it looks like from the back of the case. Let's grab the motherboard and get it installed. Let's tighten the screws to secure the motherboard in place. With the motherboard in place, we can now install the graphics card. It's highly advisable to remove that third partition to make the installation easier for the graphics card. Slide the graphics card down so it aligns with the pins on the motherboard and the opening on the back side of the case. Place that piece of partition back in place. And screw down the graphics card to the back plate. With all hardware in place, it is time to connect the cables. This is the lead for the motherboard. This is the lead from the power supply to the graphics card. This connection will secure the front panel control and USB connections. With all cables in place and nicely managed in the back, it is time to close the case. Let's secure the side panel with mounting two screws in the back. Before we completely enclose the case, let's take a look at the RGB Fusion LED lights when we apply power to the PC. So that's going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this video helped you out with building your own PC.